Hello, I'm John Walter, instructor for English 302, Advanced Composition, sections M01 and M03. And this is a short lecture on planning and drafting Project 1 for those of you who may want some additional help. Okay, so Project 1, the guidelines ask you to write a well-supported, thesis-driven rhetorical analysis of a scholarly peer-reviewed article published in the last 15 years, explaining how that article meets or fails to meet the conventions of scholarly researched argument appropriate to the article's disciplinary focus. Now, while that's a very technical and kind of accurate and actually in many ways a very clear sort of description of what you're supposed to be doing, it also relies on a lot of sort of inherent knowledge. Hopefully some of these ideas are kind of becoming familiar to you, but there are ways of sort of explaining this that we can go through and take a look at to kind of break down the task a little so it's more clear and easier to understand. So, in short, what this is asking you to do is use the Analyzing Rhetorically handout in conjunction with the Craft of Research readings, the Informed Writer readings, the enthymeme handouts, the library tutorials, and the various lectures and things to describe the kind of article you are examining and describe how it meets the conventions of its discipline. So that's sort of your first task. Since the article in question has been published in a peer-reviewed scholarly journal, you can assume that your article does meet the conventions of its discipline and of its genre. Because you can assume it meets the conventions of the discipline and genre, your goal then is to identify and explain how the article meets those conventions. So you can assume that it does, but then what you want to look at is how it does so. And so the first thing you want to do is determine the following. Is your article a quantitative or qualitative research study? Is it a theoretical argument proposing a model or a concept? Or is it an interpretative argument? So you kind of want to figure out what this article is that you're looking at. So it should, it's going to be generally one of these things. So figure out which one it is, and does it represent primary or secondary research? The tutorials from the library talked about the difference between primary and secondary research. So which those are dependent upon the disciplinary field. So is it primary or secondary research? What's its disciplinary focus? What methods does it use? Does it use interpretive methods? Does it use observational methods? Is it an experimental science, designed research project? And can you identify a genre? Is it, for instance, a very traditional IMARD research report, scientific research report? The IMRAD stands for Introduction, Methods, Results, and Discussion. Is it an argumentative essay? Is it a case study? So can you identify a genre as well? Once you know these initial questions, you have a sense of what needs to be happening in your article. For instance, if it's an IMARD report, there's going to need to be an introduction, a method section, a results section, and a discussion. You might think back to from week 4, if you looked at the John Hayes article we had. Hayes was a social science. Social science article. It was a quantitative research study following the very traditional IMARD format. On the other hand, Susan Jarrett's article on Sappho's memory, or Hanson's article on Anderson's novel Feed, both of those very traditional sort of interpretive humanities-based interpretive argumentative essay. So you can figure out these various things, and then you have an idea of what your article, what this article you're analyzing should have. From there, you can use the Analyzing Rhetorically handout and work through the handout. Try to answer as many questions as you can. Try to answer all of them, so you have at least some understanding of everything listed there. And as I said before, you're not going to be able to address everything that's in the handout in this project. In fact, you can't, because you've got a word limit of 750 to 1,000 words. But if you fill out, if you kind of answer all the questions in the handout, what you have then is a large amount of data from which you can then use to write your essay. And how you do that? Having worked through the Analyzing Rhetorical handout and kind of developed, kind of answered all the questions, kind of found examples of everything. You might look over what you've done, what you found in the particular article you're looking at. Maybe you might realize that you really you're really interested by how the author established their ethos. Or maybe you're really interested in how the author sort of explained concepts, in particular maybe how they used extended metaphors to present and explain their evidence or explain a concept. Maybe you're interested in how they addressed their audience, how they kind of work to meet their audience. Maybe you're really interested in how they sort of use disciplinary terms. Maybe you realize that the author is actually, it's working in maybe the genre of sociology, but they're drawing really heavily from another discipline. Maybe they're drawing really heavily from literary studies, and you note that they're actually sort of some of the terms they're using, the ones from sociology, they assume the terms and concepts they assume that the audience knows, but maybe some stuff they're drawing from literary studies or from some other discipline outside of sociology, they're actually kind of explaining them. And so what you've got there is that tells you something about how the author is using terms, and how the author is addressing their audience in ways. And so you look over what you found, you can then sort of identify the things that are of interest to you or the things that you think you can explain really well. And then you pick those. And again, realizing you only have 750 to 1,000 words in which to write your entire report, and that you want to use multiple examples for each claim that you make. You might decide to just focus on ethos and evidence as a way of addressing audience. So you see what we've kind of done there is you can even think about having this overarching idea of like, well, this author, addressed audience. It was really good at addressing the needs of the audience, and they do so. Two ways that they did this was through their creation of ethos, their projection of ethos, and the way they handled evidence. And then there's what you've got there. Is your rhetorical analysis. That's your frame. That's your your claim. And then obviously the rest of it is just supporting that claim with reasons and evidence. And that right there would make a decent essay, or would make a good. That right there would be the subject of a really good essay, I should say, because it is, and that could fill out 750 to 1,000 words if developed sufficiently. So, again, as I had said just a few minutes or so ago, whatever topics you choose to discuss, pick a few of them. Whatever topics kind of interest you, pick a few of them and discuss them in depth with multiple examples. So some of the issues, sort of like how they use evidence and stuff, there's multiple subpoints. So you can talk about a couple of those as well. So you work with evidence, you're going to pick like 3 or 4 of those, but you want to provide multiple examples. So for instance, if you're claiming the author handles citations really well, but only discuss one example, only offer one instance of your, provide one example of your author just handling citations, your readers have no idea if your author has really handled citations well, or if you've picked the only time they've done so. If you just use one example. There's an old saying in the military that once is happenstance, twice is coincidence, and 3 times is enemy action. And it's I like to use that as as a reminder about how we provide evidence for things. Anyone can go through, you can probably go through any article and find one good example of something. Here's a good place where the author used citations. But like I said, no one knows, if you just offer that one example, no one knows if the author has actually done the same with all citations, or if you just happen to pick the one time they did it well. And so what you do, instead of just offering one example, is offer multiple examples and discuss each of those examples. Or if you see how they kind of do a particular sorts of patterns, they use some citations citations this way, some citations that way, point those out. And the reason you do this is that what you offer multiple examples to demonstrate that there is a pattern going on rather than a one-time event. This is the idea again, it's not just happenstance, or it's not even just coincidence, but there is an intention behind it. In the military terms, enemy action is the intention. Someone is intending to do cause sabotage or whatever. There is intention behind what's going on rather than just it happened by accident. Okay, so that is a brief overview of some ways to approach Project One. If you have additional questions, remember that we do actually have an entire discussion forum dedicated to Project One, so you can ask questions there. And if you're having problems, you might take a look to see if anyone's posted a question or if there's any answers there to help you get working on Project One. And thank you.